Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to North Shore Live, Cooper's Corner. We're live this evening. This is July the 23rd, 2014. It was a beautiful day today. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope the day provided you with great special occasions to get out there and walk on the beach or walk in the park or do some sidewalk shopping, whatever you'd like to do. It was just stunning, and we hope that it continues. A little windy, but it's beautiful. I want to get right to the program, so you'll forgive me, please, if I don't go into my other issues that I would like to have gone into. How would you have known? Anyway, we have as our guest this evening Mr. Joseph M. Jason, and he is the president of NAMI, for the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, the Barrington area. And also he is a member of the Criminal Justice Advocacy for the Mentally Ill. He's a board member. And CURE, Illinois, treasurer and board member. And I don't know if you were able to catch the title on our front page, but it is called The Criminalization of Asperger's Syndrome and Mental Illness. So without any further ado, we have a very jam-packed program. Please allow me to introduce to you Mr. Jason. How are you?
Thank you.
And it's my pleasure to have you here.
Very happy to be here.
We tried getting you. I know you were busy, and you are all these, all these associations and groups that you belong to, and I know they keep you really running from one place to another. But the appreciation is for what you do for those who cannot really speak for themselves. So tell us your story. This is your story about your son, Daniel, and everybody is out there wanting to really hear and know how this happened, how this affected you. It's your story and it's your time.
Well, thank you, Bev. My son, Daniel, is one of the first ones who ended up going through the criminal justice system. He was a student at Stevenson High School. He graduated from there. He would keep his behavior together at school, and then he would act out when he would get home. There would be some behavioral issues, and we realized at that point there were some problems. He was diagnosed with Asperger syndrome at age 16, so he was one of the first ones to be diagnosed with Asperger syndrome. And for some of your audience who's not aware of Asperger syndrome, I'd like to go through some of the symptoms of what they have, but it's typical. Daniel lived with us in 2012, and he didn't look up at us the whole time. He didn't make eye-to-eye contact. It's basically an organic, neurologically based, pervasive developmental disorder on the same spectrum as autism. Back when he was diagnosed with it, wasn't as prevalent as it is today. Today, 1 in 42 boys have it, and some of the clinical features include lack of empathy, naive, inappropriate, one-sided social interaction, little ability to form friendships, and consequent social isolation. I was his coach in the BGRA. That was the baseball. We won a couple of championships, but he wouldn't interact with anybody else. He'd be sitting on the bench, and it was kind of sad. Poorly intonated speech, poor nonverbal communication. Also, an emotional developmental age significantly lower than their chronological age, which is important in talking about Daniel. And just to give you an overview where things stand with him for the moment, he was recently sentenced in Iowa to a 45-year sentence for nonviolent crimes, where he didn't even go to Iowa, which I'll get into and give you a little background. But I want to keep on going about the Asperger's. They lack empathy, the capacity to place themselves in somebody else's shoes. Daniel will contact his ex-girlfriend, but he doesn't think he's doing anything wrong in his mind. But society believes he's doing something wrong and treats him harshly. Despite what you see in the media about Adam Lanza or something like that, the vast majority of individuals with Asperger's are not violent. My son is not violent. I've advocated all the time that he's nonviolent. I mean, there's a small minority, but there's a small minority of violence with anybody who doesn't even have a mental illness. So that's one thing that I wanted to say. And basically, there's usually comorbidity with Asperger syndrome too. There could be depression or something else. I think my son does have some comorbidity, but there's not necessarily treatment. If they're obsessive compulsive like my son, there's medication. So my son went to Illinois State University for 2 years. Invariably, he would encounter a roommate issue. They would just get really angry with him, like being up at 2 or 3 in the morning on the computer, and they would like push him, and then he would defend himself, but he didn't start it. So he had some roommate issues where he had to move. So as far as in college, and then he went to the University of Iowa in a little bit before, I believe it was 2003, because he graduated in 2005, had a relationship with a girlfriend, and she wanted to end it, but then it didn't end exactly. And then at some point, she finally, as of like September of 2006, she finally, every time that he would contact her, she would go to the police. So the first time he was arrested in March of 2007, and they charged him with stalking and tampering with a witness. To this day, I don't know what that was about. Treating him like Al Capone. They gave him approximately about a 7 to 9 year sentence, but in Iowa that's like 0.42 for how long it is. So while he was incarcerated, he ended up sorry, I lost my train.
That's all right.
Oh, while he was incarcerated, he threatened an attorney that he never met, because he ends up getting angry and agitated when he is upset. He'll make verbal threats or whatever to his attorneys, other people. And so he got charged for threatening an attorney in Iowa that he never even met. And I emailed her and I told her that he was threatening people that he never met. He's not serious about it. It's part of the Asperger syndrome and the mental illness.
Now, Joe, let me just interject this for a moment, because I really want to hear this entire tragedy. This story is tragic. It's your son. He's a human being, but he's not really being treated as a disabled person because he has a mental illness. Did the court system know that he has Asperger's? Do they know what the definition is, and do they know how debilitating it is?
They were made aware. They know he's got Asperger syndrome, but they don't really have Asperger experts. And in fact, recently, my son's trial, he did have somebody testifying on his behalf, but it wasn't even counted as, it was counted as a rebuttal witness, which I'll get into a little later. So even when you have an expert, you're denied the opportunity to present the information as primary information, because my son would not sign over, release his medical records. So, yeah, they're aware of it, but they don't get it. And I've got some proposals that I'll get into a little later as far as...
legislation?
Well, as to how courts should handle things. But one of the things that I wanted to get the point across to the audience is that, there's this excellent article. It's called Mental Illness as a Disease. We hand this out, or we used to hand it out for the National Alliance on Mental Illness for people who go to our family-to-family training. I just want to read a couple of paragraphs.
Sure, that's
This is very important. Research over the past 10 to 20 years, well, this was from 1990, but it's still applicable, has documented that severe mental illnesses, including bipolar and depressive disorder, schizophrenia, pervasive developmental disorder, autism, panic and anxiety disorders, etc., they mentioned some more, are biologically based brain diseases. My son has an organic brain disorder. He doesn't think anything's wrong with him. He thinks in his mind, he's like a record groove stuck. He keeps, in his mind, and goes, I can win back my ex-girlfriend. She's not serious about this. All I need to do is talk to her. So recently, he sent emails to an account that's not even used by her. It's a dormant account. We all have dormant accounts we don't use, or some of us do. And So it wasn't even primary. He had her phone number. He didn't even contact her. So he chose, as his psychiatrist said, he chose a defective way to contact his ex-girlfriend because he wasn't really serious about it. So this article goes on saying, why can't the public understand that people suffering from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and so on deserve as much sympathy and respect as people afflicted with other serious chronic physical illnesses such as multiple sclerosis, cystic fibrosis, cerebral palsy, cancer, or lupus? If my son, if people knew, let's say, God forbid, my son had cancer and tuberculosis, everybody would think that's terrible.
Sure.
But the organic brain disorder, unless they get knowledgeable, and then they could have some empathy, or one of their loved ones.
Well, that's because they cannot see with their eyes any type of an illness on him. The illness is in him and in his brain, in his head. You can't put crutches on your brain or put your head in a wheelchair, but had they seen Daniel in some type of a walker or crutches or braces or wheelchair or on a gurney, they would say, oh my goodness sakes, there really is a problem with this young man. Let's see what we can do to help him, not to accost him, because that's what they're doing.
And that's the thing, is the only ones who get it are the public defenders, because they work with Daniel. They see. I've had many of them, they're very sympathetic. They cannot believe the judge gave such a harsh sentence, that it's unwarranted, because they see him interact. And the judge said, oh, you're not showing any remorse, so I'm going to throw the book at you, and plus I believe you can control yourself. Well, my son has been either verbally threatening somebody or trying to contact his girlfriend on and off since 2006. So why should the judge think that he can control himself? He can control himself with everybody else but his ex-girlfriend. And that's what they don't seem to understand. And and along that area, it's, my son is one of many, but this is like, somebody from the Autism Society of America said this is one of the most egregious cases they've ever seen. His forensic psychiatrist, who's been on thousands of cases, I asked him, is this like one of the worst cases you've seen? And he said it's in the top 2 or 3. So I can only imagine what the 1 and 2 would be. And what I wanted to also mention was Senator Durbin in 2009, he had a panel about human rights at home, mental illness in U.S. prisons and jails. And they recognized that mental illness has been criminalized in our country over the last 30 years. And he basically said, by allowing our prisons and jails to become a primary provider of mental health service, we have taken a step backwards in the effort to protect the human rights of people with mental illness. I mean, my son's constitutional rights have been violated.
Absolutely.
He's had cruel and unusual punishment. A lot of times he's been isolated. He hasn't been in areas, he hasn't been getting any treatment. Every time he's jailed, just waiting. He was arrested. The police came to my house October 15th, 2012. And we were given no warning. They just showed up, which I'll get into a little bit. I just wanted to touch upon the remorseful. I've got an article that speaks about that defenders should be aware that individuals with Asperger syndrome often do not appear to be remorseful. This does not mean they're callous or have a disregard for others, but expressing remorse to a decision maker with accuracy may be very difficult for them.
Sure.
And, for the judge to not understand that. So I've, as far as my son, I've, I met with, advocated all over the place. I met with Congressman Brad Schneider as part of a NAMI team early in July. Mm-hmm. I gave him a binder about my son. But of course political figures can't necessarily, or congressmen can't get involved in cases, but it's an awareness, so he gets interested in it, and he was very receptive to it, so I was pleased with that.
Well, I need to tell you, I would hope that all people, political people, congressmen, senators, anyone running for office that need votes, look into these cases and situations very strongly, because you need our votes to get into office. If you cannot help one person, You know, we put you in office, we can take you out of office or make sure that you don't even run for office. Please, you know, it's not much to ask. If you're running for office, you ask for our vote. We ask for your attention on situations that are absolutely devastating to families and to the human being that has this terrible and tragic mental disease. You know, you expressed to me something, Joe, before, that they wanted to put a shock belt on him. I think the public needs to know that.
Yes, thank you very much. We got a letter from Daniel, and it was very upsetting because his printing has become not very legible. So my wife and I are trying to decipher what he writes. And then he goes something like, I decided to have a bench trial because they were going to make me wear a stun belt for a jury trial. I immediately contacted the ACLU. Last I heard, it was being discussed somewhere in Iowa. But Amnesty International considers that torture. It can knock you unconscious. And I don't want to tell your viewers what it can do to your, you know, it is very unpleasant and shocking,
absolutely.
And what it causes you to do. So I was like researching that, and it's like, yeah, you usually have torture belts when somebody's not in control. They've murdered a few people. Yeah. I mean, I was appalled by that, and obviously Daniel's attorney, public defender, indicated that's one ground that was going to be raised because, you know, this 45 years is being appealed, and I helped to work with his appellate defender and, you know, raise that issue. But just that issue by itself, to have somebody with autism have to wear a torture belt is just so egregious. And I contacted the jail there, and they would not reply back to me. I have corroborated it is true.
Can I ask you, does the judge who sits on this bench in Iowa, does this judge have any idea what Asperger's syndrome is? Has he ever dealt with this before? Did he do research? Does he know what is going through?
That's an excellent question. In the past, with judges, I've tried to give them information about Asperger's.
And education is wonderful.
Right. But then I've been told, oh, that's ex parte. You can't communicate directly with the judge. I mean, we had people from NAMI write letters to the judge. I'd like to think he read them, but it certainly didn't. You're absolutely right, Bev. Everybody needs to be educated about autism, mental illness. I mean, Sheriff Darts certainly is always raising the issue. He understands that there's so many mentally ill in Cook County Jail. I mean, as I've said before, it's shameful. It's a scandal that we have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the incarcerated world population. I mean, that is the jail. I don't have the figures in front of me, but the jail population has increased incredibly. It's become like an institution.
Well, let me tell you something. On the internet, I'm a big fan of looking through the internet. They put these poor souls in the jail, and they said, even out of New York, they said the jail system is becoming a mental asylum because they don't know what to do with these young men who are mentally ill. They are not getting treatment, so they feel that if they put them in a cage that will contain them, that the streets will be safe. But the streets aren't safe because, Joe, people are shooting, killing little girls, 11 years old, with sleepovers here in Illinois. Illinois has the highest rate of murders, and, you know, the gun laws here are just absolutely through the roof. They don't want to do anything. They have strict rules on this. So how is it that all these gangs kill innocent little children, 2 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old, sitting on their porch, riding a bicycle, but they can't control that. But the ones that they could control or have help for are those suffering with an illness that they should get them medical attention. Medical attention.
Well, that's the thing is we at NAMI and other organizations, we believe in treatment and not incarceration. And for a fraction of the cost here, they could have put Daniel in we're willing to have them forced to some kind of treatment, but of course, you know, you get into the issues if they have rights to refuse medication and things like that.
Well, evidently they have no rights, because if the judge can put a shock belt on him, where is Daniel's right for the Constitution? And where in the Constitution, please, does it say that legal or judicial or law enforcement can put a shock belt on somebody? It doesn't say that. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Is that life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness?
I mean, they can think outside of the belt in prosecuting my son. The first time he got arrested, he went to Florida, and the police department in Iowa City and the prosecutor worked in entrapping him to come back. They worked with his ex-girlfriend and saying, "Oh, Daniel, I love you, come back, I want to be with you." So he ended up coming back to Sheridan, in Iowa, and they could think of that, but then they've spent millions of dollars between the costs of using the judge, the prosecutors, the public defenders, all this cost to incarcerate him, and now for a possible 45 years. And my wife and I also, in my petition, I raised the point, we met with the prosecutor. I gave her an alternative, a place called Trinity within Illinois, where Daniel could have been there and he could have been on electronic monitoring. And they didn't even want to consider that. They just wanted to, they didn't want to think outside of the box with alternatives to incarceration. Even before the trial, I got in my petition, they offered him an agreement a plea agreement of 10 years. Well, now, in retrospect, it probably would have been a good idea, but Daniel didn't think he had done anything, so he didn't take it, and 10 years was still pretty stiff. And the thing about the people with Asperger going to jail and prisons, they're the ones who are victimized in jail.
Absolutely.
What do you think is going to happen to someone who's looking down like this? They see that something is like, okay, he's not altogether there. Yeah. They're going to be picked on and bullied. And
well, they're going to figure that they want the other incarcerated person is going to think that he's not giving him the respect that he's entitled to. Everybody's entitled to respect. It doesn't make a difference if you're in jail or not. I mean, you're there, but that's when fights break out, because these groups, there are many gangs in the jail, and they require you to be able to pay them respect, and you have to look at them. If you hold your head down or look away, specifically the fact, as you said, for a year, he didn't even connect with you. He didn't look at you. He turned away. He had his head down. How do you think this is all going to work out for him to be in an Iowa jail? Is he in an Iowa jail?
Well, while he was awaiting the trial, he was in Muscatine because there's overcrowding in Johnson County. They have so many jails and prisons. So now he'll be moved to the, I believe I've tried to contact him, not contact him, but contact the warden and the chief psychiatrist. They haven't replied back to me. Sometimes they will communicate with you, other times they won't. Some years back when my son was originally incarcerated, we did meet with the warden. He was nice enough to meet with us, and the chief psychiatrist. And, so we're hoping at least to have a phone conference. Daniel was kept the first time in a hospitalization unit, and because that's one thing I can add. Exactly. They realized that he needed to be hospitalized, at least partially, and eventually they did get him to take some medication. But then he got indicted by the federal government. But what I wanted to say was my son basically was tried for, he was here for 4.5 months, living here, after he finally got freed in 2012. We wouldn't give him internet access, so he'd walk to the library for 4 miles and walk back for 4 miles. So eventually, things were going okay, so we gave him internet access, which was a big mistake, because then the contacts, he first started a contact when our dog died, so they pretty much let that go because he was upset about it and tried to contact his ex-girlfriend. But he tried to call his ex-girlfriend twice at her job, and he ended up sending about 20 to 30 emails, So they charged him with stalking and extortion. And I'm going to read what's on the voice messages. Because, well, and basically, before I get to that, though, the psychiatrist testified Daniel has no history of violence. He did not have intent and is not a stalker. Okay, he's not a suitor stalker. That was his opinion. In fact, when his ex-girlfriend was in the courtroom testifying, Daniel did not look at her. So he thought that was a very important thing. He said if he was a stalker, he would have looked up and looked at her, at least made some kind of contact. So his actions were flawed and ambivalent. He didn't want to contact his ex-girlfriend, so he chose a flawed way. He had her phone number, didn't call it. And he made reference to an embarrassing incident in the Johnson County Auditor's office where this girl had worked at that time. She doesn't work there. Apparently there was an employee, there's a story about this, that they were being forced to sign petitions for someone who was running for office, and I won't mention his name, but some woman was so upset about it, she defecated in her pants. And this was actually like in one of the Iowa newspapers. Somehow my son found out about it. So what I want to read is the...
So that's public knowledge then.
Right, exactly.
This is nothing that he was hiding or making scandalous. This was public knowledge. So a reporter wrote that.
Right. So he testified when he was testifying. He testified on his own behalf and actually did a pretty credible job. He's got like a photographic memory. If a prosecutor says, "Oh, that was from that that was from that library," he said, "No, it's from this library," because he remembers. I mean, in a different reality, he could be successful without the autism, but that's not what we've been dealt here. So I'll read this. I won't mention the victim's name here. But, okay, this is, bear in mind, 30 of the 45 years are because of the extortions. And there are 2 paragraphs here, and I just want to read it. Yeah, ex-girlfriend, you need to text message me or email me or something because I'm getting really angry, and I'm going to tell your employer all your dirty information, all your secrets, and if you think you're going to be really embarrassed, you should respond back to me. Bye. So he testified, okay, it's about the situation in the auditor's office, but clearly you don't know what he's talking about. So the inference
doesn't make any stipulation of what it was.
The inference is, oh, there's something embarrassing in the relationship that there was, and I'm not going to go into detail on that. But that's what the reference is. So they're like, so now they're like, they can read Daniel's mind. It's
really?
Kind of like Minority Report. Oh, we think when you get out, you're going to keep contacting her and maybe do something violent or just bother her for the rest of her life. So we're just going to keep you in jail. So let me read the other one, too. There's 2 of those. So it's like, you know, anybody could be arrested for extortion based on a message like that. It's like scary. This one's even better. This message is from my ex-girlfriend. My name is Fred Thomas. My son likes to use different names.
That's all right.
I've been sending you emails and would like to respond back to you. So he left this at the Johnson County Auditor's office. If you can't respond back to me, I really hope that I don't have to send your office some really, I don't know, embarrassing information perhaps. So if you can just write back and answer my questions that I asked for you, I'd really appreciate it. Bye. Does that sound like something you should get 15 years for? And then I want to also backtrack here. This in Iowa, extortion is a 5-year sentence. My son has an organic brain disorder, okay? He can't stop what he's doing without intense psychological therapy, perhaps medication, but I really believe he could stop it. And it's just the fact with the habitual that they're, so, okay, if you have 3 felony convictions, you get like triple. It's like 3 strikes and you're out. So it's like, wow, we could give, that's the answer for everybody who's mentally ill. Why don't we just charge them with being habitual? And we'll put them all in jail and prisons.
Put them away, that's right. That's what they want to do.
You know, I wasn't going to mention this in the beginning, but you know, there is something that, I'm not saying that the Iowans were, you know, this also happens in other places, but it's kind of scary when you're reading about Adolf Hitler eliminating the incurably ill, and the physically and mentally handicapped were viewed as useless, and they killed people who were mentally retarded, physically handicapped, and mentally ill. Well, to me, giving Daniel a 45-year sentence is just like that. And I told the prosecutor back when we met with her in December of 2012, if you're truly going to give Daniel 55 years, you might as well just go in the back and execute him, because that's effectively what you're doing.
How do we know, Joe, how can he handle himself in jail? How has he been handling himself?
Well, that's the thing is, you learn bad habits. He actually has at times become institutionalized. I've really thought when he tried to go out and look for a job, when he'd be on probation or whatever, or that he really wanted to go back because he's got a captive audience. There's people who perhaps will talk with him. He's got a routine. He needs a routine. In anything,
absolutely,
he needs a routine and structure.
Absolutely structured.
And so in that regard, but the problem is you just can't have an egregious sentence like that.
Maybe we should see some of these pictures. There's a picture of Daniel. What a handsome young man. Yeah,
that was his picture in 2005 when he graduated, and it was a very happy time. We were very happy, but then we didn't realize until 2006 that there were problems. And we tried to...
Now, when you see, Joe, excuse me, when you see him, I mean, you're seeing him. How could anyone visualize that he has any problem? He's a nice-looking young man, tall, handsome, intelligent-looking. He's not in a wheelchair. He's not with crutches. He's not with a walker. He's not with braces. He is standing there, but you don't know what's going on in his mind, in his brain. You have no idea.
And I believe at some future point we will have brain scans, and we're developing technology where people with autism, I hope and pray, can get treatment. That would be the only way to really see. You're absolutely right. I mean, and you see him on paper, it's like, well, why can't he stop his behavior? But
that doesn't work like that.
No, they need to get educated. And along those lines, I have something that actually, I'm not going to call it my creation. It also applies to mental illness. So if I say autism, you can think of mental illness also. But here's basically, this was actually proposed by the Autism Society of America. And unfortunately, they've disowned this. They don't have this on their website anymore. I got this from years ago, and I believe in it wholeheartedly.
Is this from Washington? Is this a Washington?
Yeah, I believe, but they also have affiliates in all the states too. Okay, all individuals with autism must have the right to have a condition of autism be considered first, and the implications of having autism be considered primary to any action taken by the criminal justice system prior to prosecution. That did not happen. Okay, individuals with autism must have the right to free and appropriate individualized resources to enable them to receive appropriate education and training in order that they not develop nor continue behavior that may be viewed as illegal. That hasn't happened. Proper training in the issues associated with the syndrome of autism must be provided to all individuals associated with the criminal justice system, including judges, juries, prosecutors, defense lawyers, law enforcement personnel, and any other forensic science investigators. We brought articles to the prosecutor. I've provided articles to the judge. There's a lot of literature out there about Asperger syndrome and criminality if somebody really wants to get seriously into it. Also, individuals with autism have the right to have expert witnesses. Well, the judge did allow, but in a backhanded way, he wasn't the primary because he was a rebuttal witness, and he had more experience than the other person. And so it goes on, who understand the disability of autism available to them in a court of law. If prosecuted, an individual with autism must have his disability considered primary. When sentencing is handed out, that has not happened here with a 45-year sentence.
My.
Again, nonviolent, and I cannot repeat enough, my son, his attorney kept asking all the people who were testifying, because they made a big deal about it in Iowa. They were afraid my son was going to come out. The lieutenant who was conducting the investigation, he contacted all the homeless shelters. He contacted all the hotels, the motels. I say this, and it's laughable, but it's not because of the seriousness of this. He did everything but call Daniel Jason's father me? And I would have told him, he's in his room, most of my communications through the door, he's not making eye contact, isn't in Iowa. I would have cooperated with them. I would have been willing to try to commit him in Illinois, but it's difficult too. But they're saying he's a threat. He's not a threat to himself, but he's a threat, okay, to his ex-girlfriend is what they're saying. Well, if that's the case, why not commit him?
See,
and have him forced treatment instead of going through a trial.
Here's some pictures of Daniel when he was younger. Cute. What a cute little boy.
Yeah, I mean, that, as you can see, there's a lot of,
adorable.
I'm not just out here for my son. I don't know what's going to happen.
Any one of those pictures of Daniel could fall very easily on anyone who has a child with Asperger's syndrome. And it could be, just because that's a picture of Daniel and all those other little pictures, it could be children down the block, kids down the street, kids behind you.
Practically everybody that I talk to, I work with somebody, he's got a son with autism, it's more severe than mine. I know another person, I hear of other people, grandchildren, it's become so prevalent. And back in my day, we didn't know, oh God, my son's having a meltdown here, what do I do? And I participate in a lot of autism groups, and I give them feedback, and I show what's happening to my son, and I have the petition, and they're just appalled because they realize, oh my God, this could be my son. Now, so I'm advocating for their children as well as my son, because I don't know if I'm going to be successful, but my motto is, I will not bow, I will not break, I will continue to advocate.
Now, this program is going to go on YouTube, and as you see under Joe, there is my YouTube link. So when you're going to be, viewing this on YouTube, after this program, it should be on in a couple of days or whatever. Do go on the YouTube, and you're going to find some other really astounding cases. We give everyone the platform to tell their story, the heartbreak and heartache of family members going through such devastation, Joe, is no one wants to hear them. Yes, we want to hear you. We want to hear your story. Joe is on this program now because he's telling you what he's going through with his son and what his son is going through, having a devastating mental illness, Asperger's syndrome. It's a disease. You can't just put it in a wheelchair. It doesn't work that way. And here is my my email if you want to contact me and want to be on the program. If you have a story, no matter what it is, if it's dealing with a relative, a child, whatever the situation, we want to hear your story because you are not alone out there. You're not alone. There are millions of other families who are going through situations just like yours or more severe, You can't walk in someone's shoes. You can't know what it's about until you walk in their shoes. And believe me, do not hold yourself above anyone because it could possibly happen to you. A child, a niece, a nephew, a grandchild. You have no idea genetically what is based on this disease. It's a mental disease. And as Joe stated before, he didn't find out, he and his family, until Daniel was about 16 years old. And then you get into the situation of adolescence. So how do you know what to really look for? You have to understand, this is a father pleading for his son, wanting to make awareness to everyone so it doesn't happen to you. So we want to hear more, Joe. So
thanks, Bev. One thing I wanted to mention, too, the impact on the family. I mean, it causes a chronic sorrow. It's like...
perpetual.
Yeah, it's just never ending. And, all of us have lost loved ones. It's very painful to lose your mother, lose your father, God forbid anybody else. But it is true to some degree. You always have some pain, but it gets better with time. This is just like a roller coaster where it just doesn't go away. It's kind of, I've referred it, I even mentioned this to the prosecutor, you know, for those of us who've watched The Twilight Zone, it's kind of like a Twilight Zone episode.
Sure.
I mean, it would be like an episode that something that Rod Serling could have come up with.
That's right, you can't believe it.
You just can't believe it's like there's just, that's the thing with, you know, other illnesses or something, there could be a bottom, but with mental illness and autism, there's not necessarily that bottom where they, you know, where if you're a drug addict or something, you could reach bottom and get better or whatever, but not with this, not with, you know, something, you know, happening, some...
And anything could trigger it. I mean,
well,
a stress, a heartbreak. You know, you mentioned that your family dog pet had passed away. So his attention and his love for that animal.
Right. I mean, that's the thing is they don't. The judge doesn't say it. Daniel loved his dogs. The dogs would come upstairs. You know, that's something that he could.
And that's unconditional love.
And show his love.
And that's unconditional love. The animal loves him,
and that's an excellent point. I mean, 1 in 4 adults actually. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. No problem.
1 in 4 adults has comes down with a mental illness, and it's like also like 25% in colleges too. So you know, you hear of a lot of kids going away to college and coming down with mental illness and schizoaffective things, and not just here, you know, about autism, but obviously that's the main focus. But a lot of it manifests itself. Everything's going well until they go to college.
They've never been away before.
They haven't been away, and then all of a sudden it triggers something schizoaffective or depression.
Absolutely.
And there's issues of suicides, and colleges don't like to give you those public figures.
No, they don't.
But mental illness is such an important issue in our country, you know, and we're always working to get legislation. But I wanted to just get back to, I didn't finish the points on this. So I believe I left off, okay, so individuals with autism must have the right to have expert witnesses who understand this disability of autism available in a court of law. If prosecuted, an individual with autism must have his disability considered primary when sentencing is handed out. That didn't happen. Consideration of a secure residential autism treatment agency. If incarceration is indicated, that was just basically the feedback that I got from the prosecutors. Like, if you can find a locked facility to keep your son in, well, that's great, but, you know...
That's inhumane.
Really. Well, I hope someday there's like one in Florida, the forensic facilities, where there's something where they can be temporarily housed, hospitalized, made better, and released. So that's the problem. There is no thing like that. And then it also goes on, the criminal justice system must ensure the protection of the civil rights of the individual with autism. Should the individual be incarcerated in a correctional institution or other human service agency? That's why I'm trying to advocate for Daniel being in Iowa classification. And also, individuals with autism must be protected under the American with Disabilities Act, ensuring that their autism is not the reason for the conviction of the criminal justice action.
But that's exactly
what happened to me. Was convicted.
Absolutely, because of that.
That's why I call it, in Daniel's case, the criminalization of Asperger syndrome and mental illness.
Yes.
Because that's exactly...
That's a very good point, Joe. That's an excellent point, that they mustn't be incarcerated because of that illness. And look, you just read that, and that comes from, what is the... that's from the Asperger's Association?
Well, this was from the Autism Society of America, but they won't claim ownership anymore, so I'll take it.
Well, listen, they put it in black and white, so, you know.
And that's been the frustrating thing to me. I've reached out to autism organizations for their help, advocacy, and I've been very disappointed with, you know, you'll get the, oh, we're sympathetic and all that, but nobody actually wants to get into the minutia of the actual case. I wish, unfortunately, in Iowa they don't record it. If people had seen Daniel testifying on his behalf, seen him looking down like this the whole time, I think it would have made an impression on the nation. It's just, I hope someday, you know, all court proceedings will be televised, because I think that's important. Just like, you know, a lot of times now everything's televised. You get a ticket. They give you a
That's,
picture of your windshield.
Right.
It's like you go through a red light, you get a picture of that. So that's the way our society is going. So I've provided testimony, written testimony for Senator Durbin. One of the things when they had law enforcement responses to disabled Americans, I've tried to get the message out through other organizations and networking. There's somebody I network with, an organization called LEAN. I forget what the acronym stands for. So through her, I also provided this information to the Office of Autism Research Coordination. And
well, you're contacting the right people, but no one seems to be taking any action on your behalf.
Well, like anything else, as you're well aware of, progress when you're dealing with autism, mental illness, is very slow. And we just have to keep on advocating and get the message out. That,
well, you know, as I stated before, you know, if you have the right as an American citizen, as a voter, as a resident of Illinois, you have the right to connect and contact your congressman, your alderman, your state's attorney, whomever you choose. These are people that run for office and need your vote. And if they want your vote, they need to step forward and say, what can I do to help you? And you've given them information. If in fact, you know, Mr. Durbin does not see clearly that he needs to have your vote, then, you know, there's always a write-in. Do whatever you feel is appropriate. Too long and too much of the situation is they take their position for granted. He's been in office 30 years. I mean, give me a break here. Maybe he's jaded and doesn't really realize what's going on. He just thinks it's going to be another, you know, sleigh ride through the snow because he's going to get into office. Well, if enough people from NAMI, from Asperger's, from the criminal court system, from CURE, from LURE, from whatever you've got, get together, they say, hey, he's our Illinois senator, and you have another one as well, Mark Kirk, and he's a disabled person. And so the fact is that, you know, you put this information in front of them. You don't need them to give you a litany of paperwork of what they've done in the latest run for their position. You need them to step forward and say, Mr. Jason, what can I do for you? I received this information. I'm sure he's going to be seeing it on YouTube. Everybody's going to be seeing this on YouTube. We're going to call you out, Mr. Durbin and Mr. Kirk, for the situation that Mr. Jason is going through with his son, who is a disabled person, So, you know, if you don't hear a reply from them, hey, when it comes time to vote, use your head and not your heart, because, you know, your heart you can be swayed, but your brain tells you, if you can't help me, why do I need you in office? Very easy. They are there, they get a pension, they retire, they live off the fat of the land, and where are those who are mentally ill? Where are those that are disabled mentally? Where are those that are disabled physically? Where are the senior citizens that are in nursing homes that are that have their mental disability? Alzheimer's or whatever. If they can't care, it's a caring situation, a care for those that are less fortunate, Joe, than they. Do we really need them in office? Do we really need them in office? You need to find someone that is a strong advocate and will fight a good fight and be a hero to everyone that is disabled, regardless if it's physical or mental. We need that personality. If you want to run for office, run for office. This gentleman can give you thousands of people that will vote. And this is on YouTube, and everybody is going to hear it and see it. Because if you can step forward and be a person of compassion, concern, and you can make a difference, we need you. We need you in Congress. We need you in the Senate. We need you anywhere there's a political office. I don't care if you're running for the red, white, and blue stripes. I don't care if whatever you're running for, you will get the votes. And if you want to see if it comes true, try it. Absolutely try it. because people are hungry for someone who will advocate for a disability, because in every family you will find someone, wherever they may be, has a disability. You know, considering old age is not a disability, but what comes along with old age could possibly be. We need help. We need someone to hold our hand and say, come with me, and I will be able to be your protector and your advocate, and I will stand beside you and fight for you. That's the one that you need in political office. I speak from experience. But this is Joe's program, and so I won't go any further with that. Please tell us more, Joe.
Yeah, I wanted to mention, you know, people will ask, okay, well, what should you do with Daniel? What can, you know, if you don't have him in there? And I mean, there are alternatives. I just wanted to briefly read something that actually a psychiatrist or psychologist who evaluated Daniel when he was in federal prison. This was back in 2012. And I mean, she understood what needed to be done with Daniel, and I'd like to read some of this.
Sure.
Mr. Jason is diagnosed with Asperger syndrome, a form of autism. Characteristics of disorder include difficulties using eye contact and facial expressions to communicate with others, deficits relating to others on an emotional level, and in social understanding and difficulties forming appropriate peer relationships. Mr. Jason's intellectual level appears to be in the average or above range for his age. His language skills are not impaired, and he has adequate self-help skills. He has demonstrated that he's intelligent and capable of learning different ways to cope with his experience. The challenge has been in his learning coping skills when life experience is frustrating to him, and that could be when he's trading options and he's losing money and getting upset,
Sure.
which is when he would contact his ex-girlfriend. And then it goes on, and people don't react to him as he thinks they should act. Mr. Jason makes little eye contact, talks in a monotone voice, which is very prevalent for autism, Asperger syndrome, and easily lapses into negativity regarding his life circumstances. His negativity and acting out behavior when frustrated are the biggest challenges for treatment providers. He has had chronic difficulties fitting in with society. He shows some desperation to have friends. Yeah, Daniel wants to have friends. He wants to have a normal life, and he can't. And that's the tragedy of it. So it goes on, friends, associates, and people who will care about him. His lack of social understanding has resulted in his missing cues, making inappropriate comments to people, and crossing boundaries when he is frustrated or angry, which impacts his judgment and problem solving. He has a tendency to focus intensely on one subject area that can take on an obsessional quality and has shown difficulties discussing things outside of that topic. Well, in his case, that's his ex-girlfriend. That's the only way he breaks the law. He has acted out here by writing letters and using the phone inappropriately when he feels frustrated or anxious. He got into trouble once just making phone calls at random, and he contacted somebody. And like they investigated that because he ended up talking to somebody that they were concerned about, so it's like, it was at random. Therefore, because he was lonely. Therefore, during Mr. Jason's incarceration and Peking, that was in Illinois, I think, yeah, it was in Illinois for a while, we checked in with him daily. This helped to teach him appropriate standards of behavior while providing him alternative ways of expressing his negative emotions. We recommend that Mr. Jason be able to check in with a mental health professional or case manager on a daily basis once he's transferred as a means to help him work through his frustrations. That has not been happening while he's in jail. And it's not going to happen, well, hopefully it'll happen to some degree, but later on. While being a supportive time, this can also be a time to daily set clear boundaries on any inappropriate behavior. That's one thing I wanted to mention too. We've had the difficulty of Daniel not wanting to take medication all through his life.
Yeah, that happens.
Because I just wanted to back up a second. I forgot to mention that Daniel started out at a young age with absence seizures. He'd blank out for a few seconds. He'd be looking at you, but he wasn't there. It was really kind of scary looking, so he's put on medications for that. And actually, when he supposedly outgrew it, he started manifesting some behavioral problems at a younger age, like around 9. I remember being at Disney World. He was running away from us and acting up and things like that when we really realized, that something was going on. So that later on, when he turned older, manifested itself into autism. So let me go on here. Taking a cognitive behavioral approach, we worked with Mr. Jason to help him recognize and modify his numerous automatic negative thoughts to more accurately read the behavior of others, to better understand social interactions, and then to modify his behavior in response to others. We also spent time encouraging him to accept his Asperger diagnosis and to modify his expectations, rather than to become angry and act out because he cannot relate like others to do in society. So he's acting out, he's contacting, making inappropriate threats, things like that. It is recommended, they recommended he be put in supportive residential placement, that he have contact with peers, as he tends to withdraw and spend a lot of time by himself if he withdrew. And it would give him the social support and encourage him to develop positive skills. So he would avoid angry thinking, depression, inappropriate behavior. They also supposedly addressed depressive symptoms with him too. And here and there they said the staff referenced books and literature on Asperger syndrome. How refreshing that while he was in this federal prison, at least they made an effort to know about Asperger syndrome. And
we have about 2 minutes left.
Okay.
So go ahead. No, keep continuing.
The time went by really fast.
I told you. It goes quickly.
So they go on, by utilizing literature and community resources, treatment providers can help Mr. Jason with potential employers. And as I said, even in a perfect world, there would be there's challenges having
every day
children with Asperger's. Every day. With autism, it's now the autism syndrome spectrum. And society has to change to accommodate everybody who has autism, because unfortunately their parents are not going to live forever. These are kids that have special needs, and there's one closing comment that I want to make, if I could find it before we go off. I really like this quote. This is by E. Fuller Torrey.
Oh, I know him.
Yeah, from the Treatment Advocacy founder. I used to put this on my emails. If societies are judged by how they treat the most disabled members, our society will be judged harshly indeed. And that is just so true.
Because his sister is mentally ill. Mm-hmm. So I know him. And he's out of St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington.
Yeah, he's a wonderful advocate. I read his book recently.
Outstanding.
He's got a lot of great ideas.
Oh, outstanding.
But even there's not agreement within the community.
Absolutely
there's divisions.
Is there anything else that we want to get on here before we have to close the program? But
no, I think
we did a lot of work fast, and
I think we pretty much I've said what I wanted to cover in the show. I want to thank you so much for the opportunity.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
You're doing such a service to people with autism, people with mental illness, by giving me an opportunity to talk about it.
We want to help everyone. We want to help everyone. We want to advocate for those who are not being cared for. Thank you for allowing us in your home, your place of business. I hope you have a pleasant evening and a very safe week. And thank you for watching again. And see you next week on North Shore Live, Cooper's Corner. And please contact us on my website. It's my email, or on the YouTube. And we'll love to have you. If you have a problem, please come on my program. Thank you for watching. Good evening.